Never seen anyone so shameless. Just because he took one look at the beautiful woman in the hibernation pod, he was overcome by lust. So he intentionally broke her hibernation pod, causing her to be awakened. Afterwards, not only did he act as if nothing had happened, but he also hypocritically said, "Has your hibernation pod malfunctioned too?" In fact, there was a major reason why he did this. He was just too lonely. Originally, he was safely resting inside his own hibernation pod, but the starship collided with a meteor in space. The violent shaking caused internal damage to the ship, and while the system automatically repaired some parts, the pod belonging to the unlucky Jack happened to malfunction. The hibernation pod, which was originally scheduled to sleep for 120 years, woke him up ahead of schedule. Upon waking, Jack searched everywhere for signs of other people but found that except for himself, it was completely empty. When he reached the observatory and learned that the ship had only left Earth over 30 years ago, he broke down. There were still more than 90 years left to reach the destination planet. Due to the starship's status restrictions, he could only live in the simplest room, order the cheapest coffee, and eat uniform food. He wanted to wake up the crew members for help, but he lacked the authorization to open the cabin door. Seeing the crew still fast asleep through the window, Jack found a hammer and attempted to force his way in to seek help. However, the control room door was incredibly solid. Even using an electric welding torch to cut it left absolutely no trace. Ultimately, he tried every possible method but still failed to open that iron door. Yet just as the despairing Jack was wandering aimlessly around the ship, he unexpectedly saw another person standing at the opposite bar. But when an excited Jack walked over to the bar and took a closer look, he realized the other party was merely a robotic bartender. Jack fell into complete despair, helplessly accepting his fate of dying alone. However, he didn't want to just pass away in a daze like this. Since he couldn't re-enter hibernation, he figured he might as well live in the moment and enjoy the time he had left. He decided to stop obeying the ship's class restrictions, unceremoniously pried open the door to a presidential suite, squatted in the top billionaire's room, and freely played with various entertainment facilities. When he got tired of playing, he would go to a high-end restaurant and indulge in all kinds of gourmet food without restraint. But this kind of self-indulgent life only lasted for a year, and Jack, who had turned himself into a total slacker, began to find it dull and meaningless, and his emotions became extremely unstable. The prolonged loneliness made him drown his sorrows in alcohol every day, and from time to time he would complain about the unfairness of fate. Why was everyone else safely in hibernation while he was the only unlucky one to wake up? But it was during this breakdown that Jack made a new discovery. Behind the hibernation area, there was another separate space containing two spacesuits. Guided by the smart system, Jack put on the spacesuit and pressed the red button with the help of his magnetic boots. After hooking onto the tether, Jack stepped onto the edge of the starship. After glancing around, he activated the magnetic button, instantly floating into the depths of the endless space. Looking at the dark and mesmerizing view before his eyes, Jack finally couldn't help but shed tears. Compared to the brilliant stars shining all around him, his life was so insignificant that it couldn't even compare to a tiny speck of dust. Jack saw no hope for the future, and the endless loneliness even made him temporarily contemplate ending it all. Now all he had to do was press this red button, and without any protection he would instantly be swept away by the rushing airflow, completely ending his miserable life. Yet after hesitating for a long time, Jack ultimately couldn't summon the courage. The fear brought by death eventually conquered the loneliness in his heart. But it was precisely because of this retreat that when Jack stood up and inadvertently looked back, he caught sight of that earthly angel who made his heart skip a beat. And it was precisely because of her appearance that not only did the depressed Jack regain hope for the future, but it also directly changed the fates of the 5,000 hibernating passengers on board. Looking at the sophisticated beauty speaking eloquently in her video bio, Jack's lonely heart completely succumbed. In the days that followed, Jack constantly kept the sleeping beauty company, staring blankly and smiling while eating and watching her video files. But as he gained a deeper understanding of her, a terrifying thought suddenly began to brew in Jack's mind. If he took action to wake up the sleeping beauty, perhaps his life would no longer be lonely, but this would also completely ruin her life. Jack's heart fell into a painful dilemma. From the moment he saw Emma, Pandora's box had been opened. No matter how he struggled, that fact could not be changed. Watching Emma be awakened, Jack felt a wave of excitement at first, followed immediately by a shroud of immense fear. He knew deep down that this was a murder without blood. While Emma was still groggy from just waking up, Jack hurriedly took his equipment and fled back to his room. Not daring to commit suicide but daring to strip away someone else's life, the complex emotions made him tense to the extreme. As the elevator slowly ascended, Jack arrived at the central hall and met Emma, who was just as confused as he once was. He brought Emma to the observation room and told her there were still 89 years left until their new home. Waking up ahead of schedule due to some unknown malfunction was naturally unacceptable to Emma. Just like Jack back then, she ran to the main control room trying to open the door, and went back to the hibernation room looking for a backup pod. After a brief breakdown, Jack used his experience of more than a year to tell Emma that he had tried every single method imaginable, and without exception they had all failed. Facing the distraught Emma, Jack knew she needed time to accept it. When Emma returned to her room, Jack found Arthur and repeatedly instructed him to keep the secret, emphasizing that Emma must never know the truth. As time passed with Jack's companionship, Emma gradually adapted to life on the starship. They played dance games together, hung out at Arthur's bar, played basketball, and watched movies. Everything was developing in the direction Jack had hoped for. Finally, one day, Jack used a self-made robot to send a formal date invitation to Emma. Jack meticulously changed into a suit and personally went to greet Emma. The two of them first had a drink at Arthur's place, then enjoyed a romantic dinner at the restaurant. Afterward, Jack took Emma, put on their spacesuits, and walked out of the starship. At this moment, Jack was overwhelmed with emotion, finally able to admire the magnificent galaxy with the person he loved. And Emma also felt incredibly lucky that at least in this vast universe she had Jack keeping her company. That night, Jack got his wish, and Emma regained her hope for life. In the days that followed, Jack, immersed in happiness, gradually forgot about his past actions. He found the plant cultivation room, and when the delicate roses bloomed before their eyes, Emma felt that even back on Earth, romance was nothing more than this. When the starship bypassed Arcturus for a gravitational slingshot acceleration, only Jack and Emma witnessed this shocking sight with their own eyes. The light of Arcturus witnessed their love and also reflected the vulnerability of human nature. After returning to the bar, Emma happily told Arthur that she and Jack were already deeply intimate and shared no secrets between them. The word secret, however, caused a misunderstanding for the robot Arthur. While Jack went to the restroom to prepare the proposal ring, Arthur revealed that shocking truth. Hearing Jack admit it with his own mouth, Emma felt as if she had been struck by a bolt from the blue. She began to doubt whether everything she had experienced during this time was real. Facing all this, Jack was at a loss for words, only able to watch helplessly as Emma returned to her room, falling into extreme rage and despair. Even though her hysterical screams couldn't provoke a single ripple in the universe, it was enough to tear the beauty between the two of them to shreds. At night, Emma came to Jack's room, punching and kicking the man who had destroyed her life. Yet, the moment she picked up the steel pipe, she still couldn't bring herself to strike hard. Or perhaps it was the fear of facing loneliness once again. She ultimately put down the weapon. In order to beg for Emma's forgiveness, Jack spoke through the broadcast about how he had fallen in love with her. But in Emma's eyes, these ridiculous one-sided feelings were nothing but a cheap excuse. Just like her roar, this was an outright murder of someone's life. At this time, the starship's malfunction grew increasingly severe, finally crashing completely. The power suddenly cut out while Jack was taking the elevator, and the machines went out of control while Emma was eating, spraying desserts wildly. Just then an unfamiliar voice came through. Someone complained, "Who on earth planted a tree in the main hall?" When Jack and Emma rushed over, they saw the third person to be awakened, the starship's deck officer Gus. Just like Jack, he had also woken up early due to a hibernation pod malfunction. Under Gus's leadership, the three finally entered the bridge. The flight path display showed that there were still 88 years left until the destination planet. However, the ship system errors couldn't possibly sustain the entire voyage, so Gus asked Jack and Emma to help troubleshoot the issues. When checking the hibernation room, Gus quickly discovered their secret. Jack woke up due to a malfunction while Emma was intentionally awakened by someone. Jack did not deny it. Returning to the bridge, Emma found Gus, hoping he could deliver justice. But because of a severe hibernation pod malfunction, Gus's bodily functions had already been destroyed. After a medical check, it was discovered that his body had 616 disorders, and his lifespan was down to just 2 hours. So the officer handed the highest clearance wristband over to Jack, and begged them to fix the ship to ensure the safety of the 5,000 people in the hibernation pods. As soon as he finished speaking, the officer closed his eyes forever. Facing this situation, Jack and Emma had to temporarily put aside their personal grievances. They quickly found where the problem lay. A meteor had pierced through the hull, damaging the nuclear reactor controller, making it impossible to vent the reactor's high temperatures. This meant that the uncooled reactor would eventually explode. Left with no choice, Jack could only remove the heat shield, put on his spacesuit, and go outside for the repair operation. At that instant, Emma understood that if anything went wrong with Jack out there, it would mean life and death separation for the two of them. To keep Emma alive, Jack went outside the ship to find the vent. However, frustratingly, the switch here had also malfunctioned. To keep the vent open, someone had to hold it down firmly. So at the final moment, Jack resolved to sacrifice himself. He then ignored Emma's pleas and forcefully ordered her to open the mechanism. At that instant, the scorching energy of the reactor surged out, and the violent blast nearly melted Jack. Finally unable to hold on, Jack was blasted out of the vent by the shockwave. The safety tether connecting him to the ship also suddenly snapped, and as the distance between Jack and the ship grew, Emma couldn't even hear his voice anymore. So she also put on a spacesuit, intending to head out into space to rescue him. Unfortunately, the length of the safety tether was limited, and there was always a distance between her and Jack. Luckily, Emma noticed the broken safety line at that moment and finally succeeded in pulling Jack back. Afterwards, she dragged Jack into the medical pod, but to her surprise, the artificial intelligence stated that Jack was already dead. Refusing to accept this, Emma quickly used the officer's clearance to deploy every single available resuscitation method. In the end, Jack actually woke up again. Although they couldn't enter hibernation again with each other's company, they never felt lonely anymore.
Please don't leave yet. If you enjoyed this recap, could you subscribe? It really means a lot to me. Thank you. See you in the next movie.